The organizers said that my slideshow was obscene, so I will only have to give you 3.5 thoughts. I don't have any pictures. The first thought is that if you look back on the Iraq war, the Afghanistan war, the Israeli war with Hezbollah, you will see a strange phenomenon. The war opens with extremely high technology. In fact, we learn new words, stealth, and all sorts of new equipment. Then it turns out that you have to use medium technology. Suddenly, they have to have armored vehicles. They have to run to some kibbutz, Sasa, to armor up their vehicles to be able to survive. So it begins with super high tech, then it goes into medium tech, and suddenly armor, and so on. And then it goes into low tech. When things get serious, is the infantry. As a former infantryman, I don't cry about this. But the fact is that you start with high tech, and high tech seems to give you the result. It turns out that result was ephemeral. It lasted a very short time. And the war, however, continues. People getting killed, and you're not in control. So now you go into medium tech, and you send in your regular troops, and now, as I say, you have to get armor and all these old-fashioned things, and tanks and armored vehicles and so on. And then you discover that's not enough. And you have to have, in fact, the infantry. And that is how the Iraq war ends for the United States, is with infantry officers from the Army and the Marine Corps going and connecting with Sunni, local so-called Sunni awakening people, and getting them to with small arms, with rifles, light machine guns, and the highest tech they had was the mortar, which is just a tube from which you fire, which is a 13th century technology, 13th century technology. The same thing in Afghanistan. In Afghanistan, I was there actually at the very beginning. It was really wonderful. You had Green Berets and so on, and a few of us, and boom, the Taliban, we had to make a small attack. The Taliban gathered, and invisibly, the missile would come from B-52. Well, it turns out that the Taliban learned that when they concentrate, they get killed, so they didn't concentrate. And instead, they started operating. Suddenly, you need medium tech, and then it ended up again with the infantry. So what we have here is a regression. In the case of Hezbollah, the Israelis tried to deal with Hezbollah with the Air Force alone, and then towards the end, they discovered that they have to send in the Plugot Sayeret, that is the light infantry, the select infantry, to go in with some machine guns, and with the short rifle and other things, and so on. And I predict that all the wars conducted under these rules will be wars where the high tech does not deliver. The high tech will give you a beautiful opening, and there'll be great television, and then you discover you have to go to medium tech, and you take casualties, then to low tech, and so on. And this tells you something very fundamental. However, there are some people who really would like to see proper wars again, good wars, like the Second World War, with divisions, with regiments, tanks, aircraft. And I know how you can get that. All you have to do is to follow the guidance of the great moral figures and political leaders of our time. Kissinger, Clinton, Blair, some of them are here. All of them have signed the Declaration Against Nuclear Weapons. If they succeed, there is here Kanat Kalimbetov of Kazakhstan who tells me, don't worry about it, it will never happen. But if they were to succeed, and I've engaged some of them, I said, tell me, are you a fool or you're a knave in advocating the end of nuclear weapons? Because just contemplate what's happened in the last 9 months between China and the United States. There's a progression towards a war over islands and territories. I was in Arunachal Pradesh. The entire Arunachal Pradesh in India is claimed by China. While I was there was a border incident in Ladakh. The only reason these conventional wars don't come back is because of nuclear weapons. So before people should sign the names to statement of declaration saying, I want to abolish nuclear weapons, they have to also sign to a second declaration. I'm nostalgic for large-scale war. And I want large-scale war with armored divisions, with bombardments, and so on and so forth, because that is what you will get. And if you see the dispute over the Senkaku Islands, over Gilawan, Padawan, Scarborough with Philippines, Senkaku with Japan, of course, Arunachal Pradesh with India, with Vietnam over the Sirte, the White Island, and the Spratlys, you'll see how ready to have a conventional war. So let us hope that the bad people will, the inertia and bad people will win, and we will remain with them. And so. Now, I predict, incidentally, going about low tech, that if there is an Hezbollah confrontation, although the technology will be not useless, it will be Israeli, if they want to win, they'll have to mobilize the infantry, and they'll have to go in with knives as well as some machine guns and root them out house by house to get the different rockets. Otherwise, the people in Carmiel will be disturbed at night from rockets, even though Hezbollah rockets have the lowest rate of lethality of any weapons in history. They're less lethal than a BB gun, that is the air pressure gun that my son used to smash a window the other week. Now, then there is another thought I have for you. And it's a thought for some of the people on this platform and some of you in the audience. If you look at the budgets of research and development budgets of every country, all the good advanced countries, you discover they spend 90% of their money on classic existing platforms. Not the Heron TP he was talking about, but on the Joint Strike Fighter, which is now reached, I think, what is it, $1 trillion or 17 billion, I don't know, and is 20 years late and so on. They spend, you give them money and they call it research and development. They actually spend it to achieve small, aesthetic, incremental, marginal improvements on a jet fighter. At the end of the day, it will be slightly better than the previous fighter as a platform, not as a system. You give money, and the army gets it, they're going to improve the battle tank, the troop carrier, the infantry combat vehicle, the artillery. And some of the artillery is 13th century in configuration. You give the money to the US Navy, they will achieve a small improvement in aircraft carriers. Make it a little bit bigger, a little bit faster, a little bit this, a little bit that. So 90% of the money is not really used for research and development. It's used for marginal improvement of classic platforms. Now, where does the huge improvement come from? Well, it comes from that 10%. And if you look at the 10%, that's all the electronics. Where is the adaptation of research and development, but done outside the defense world? In other words, outside the defense world, where there are private people, they do things, little things like the internet, the Microsoft, and all that stuff. Of course, ARPA was involved, Advanced Research Project Agency in the Pentagon. Because why? Advanced Research Project Agency in the Pentagon, when you give them money, they don't use it to achieve marginal incremental improvements in changing the color of their laptops. Instead, they actually use it for innovation. But ARPA, the Advanced Research Project non-platform spending, is 3% of the research and development, 2%. So we're spending 90% of the money on something, and in fact, we're getting 90% of the improvement for them 10%, because that 10% connects to the outside world, which does research and development for real. That is to make money. Not to make slightly by the tank, but to sell out ways for $1.3 billion. These people are serious. There are serious people, but they're not inside the military research and development world.
You already owe me 1 minute.
Okay, I'm stopping right there. And one final thing. I'm personally grateful to Mr. Snowden. He will, if captured, go to jail for 20 years. But I'm grateful to him for 2 points. One is, as a taxpayer, PRISM is going through the haystack, looking for needle. You intercept everybody to find 3 guys. And as a taxpayer, I will tell you, I wanted to stop. Secondly, of course, the Americans will have to decide whether they want to protect individual liberty, including privacy, or whether they want to kill 3 Mahmouds. I do these things by shooting them in the head, and not by spending billions of dollars and hiring Snowdens at $200,000 a year until they run away with their stuff. Goodbye.